Hi, my name is Madeline Power. I'm a third-year commerce student, and today I'm going to be talking about the Week 1 and Week 4 self-reflections.
Hi, my name is Jessica Kotzeff, and I'm also a third-year commerce student, and today I'm going to be talking about the second and third self-awareness assessments. So after reading the Learning to Learn article, I felt that two of my strengths were self-awareness and curiosity. So this idea of acknowledging your biases and understanding them to make your self-reflections more accurate is something that I already do regularly. I noticed that a lot of people, myself included, would lie to themselves about what went wrong or what they did to contribute to a failure. I saw how much this held people back. When you do that, you're really incapable of objectively understanding a situation and then making the necessary changes to make sure that you don't repeat the mistake. So I make it a priority to reflect objectively, and although it can be tough to accept or admit some of my faults, it has helped me grow tremendously. As well, it has helped me recognize when I've done something well and why. As for curiosity, I'd love to understand not only what is happening, but why and how, and kind of what different kind of outcomes can come from a situation. This helps me when I conduct work or research and when I'm evaluating a situation.
So after reading the article, I realized that self-awareness is one area I believe I really excel in. I've always been quite self-aware and am able to reflect and be very critical of myself when needed. With that said, this has not always been a strength for me, but has been something that I've worked very hard to achieve by consciously observing and checking in with myself. Similarly to Jess, I've worked on avoiding unconscious biases and reflecting very objectively on myself. This objective reflection really works in two ways for me. I have to work on not being overly critical, but also remain aware of not being too positive as well, and ensuring I always note areas of improvement. My second area of strength is my aspiration. I'm generally very positive and have been encouraged all my life to try anything that comes my way. I very rarely turn down opportunities and have become very comfortable with failure. My dad always taught me that failure is very subjective, and the definition of it really depends on how you look at the situation. I've always learned to look at the situation in a positive light and try to learn from those moments, and maybe when I'm not succeeding as I hoped.
Okay, so as for my weaknesses, I think that I struggle with aspiration as well as vulnerability. When it comes to aspiration, I do enjoy learning new skills, but I can be very self-critical, so I tend to think of what could go wrong or why I can't or won't be able to do something. As for vulnerability, this is a similar issue to aspiration, where I have critical self-talk, so this could hold me back in terms of mastering new skills. So to kind of work on these and what Maddie can do to help me out is my parents have always been a source of encouragement. They push me to do things that will challenge me and to accept the outcome, whether it's positive or negative. I find that at university I miss that support system and it can start to hold me back. So this is where I could have Maddie step in, and if I go to her for advice, I think encouraging me to take the challenge, reminding me that failure in one thing does not determine failure in others.
A weakness of mine has always been my ability to let people in, so I can really work on letting myself be more vulnerable. I'm also very self-critical, so I sometimes worry that others may be thinking these critical thoughts. It can sometimes lead to myself getting my guard up unnecessarily, which is something I recognize and certainly something I'm trying to work on. Secondly, I am naturally a very curious person, and I love to try new things and understand how and why things work. But with that said, sometimes curiosity can lack when I fall into a routine, and sometimes I can let my personal interests fall on the back burner when it comes to exploring things that I'm curious about, especially at university. With having Jess as a partner, similar to her, I've always had a very strong support system at home, and my parents have always encouraged me and pushed me beyond my boundaries. One area of my life that I need to work on improving is my vulnerability, so Jess could be a really great resource for me to go to when I'm feeling self-critical, because it's really great to have someone to remind you that you're actually doing a good job and that everyone around you thinks the same. In the Week 1 self-assessment, I was surprised about my score on the tolerance of ambiguity. Although I know I really like to have a stable schedule and I prefer steady situations to those that are changing, I did not realize that I was as intolerant as this test indicated. The intolerance is something that could potentially hold me back as a manager, as situations are always changing in that role, and being able to tolerate ambiguity is very important. Among my strengths in my personal assessment were my management skills. So in this section, I scored in the top quartile, and I think as someone that has not been in a management role other than in school settings, it's really hard to judge where my skills are actually like. In my role as co-chair for QWIL, I lead a team of 25 individuals, and through this role, I've really been trying to work on my management style. So one of the things that I've developed is one-on-one meetings and anonymous feedback surveys. So I feel like these anonymous surveys will really help me truly assess my management style and help me improve for the future when I can hopefully lead a real team in the workforce. My core self-evaluation score brought to light a weakness that I discussed earlier, which is my tendency to be very self-critical. With this assessment, I did not assign a 5 to any question, and I only scored in the second quartile. So this is something that I've always been aware of, but it's also a really great reminder that I need to be more self-confident in my abilities. This is really important to note because as a manager, your subordinates are going to be looking up to you to be confident in your abilities and to make decisions and lead the team. So this is something I can definitely work on. What I'm taking away from this assessment is that I must be less self-critical and work on my tolerance of ambiguity. In the workforce, it's critical to be able to adapt to changing situations, especially in the role of a manager. So this is something that I intend to remain mindful of and an area where I can improve.
Okay, so when taking the week 2 assessments, I was really surprised by my competitive score. I have never thought of myself as a competitive person and was surprised to see that this was my second highest score. This really made me reflect on what kind of motivation I would like in the workforce, and also if there's any new avenues that I should be exploring in my personal life, like joining a sports team. Among my strengths is, I would say, my definite strengths in this area are my low hostility levels and my locus of control score. I only scored 1 point on the locus of control scale. I really do not believe in destiny, and I do believe that if you are strategic and work hard, you can tackle most situations. As it states in the internal scores description, this helps me keep a consistently low stress level, even when many different stressors start to pile up. Low hostility levels are a strength because this is not damaging to my personal health and keeps my negotiation skills and interpersonal relationships healthy. Among my weaknesses, I would say I have a high urgency and impatience score. This is harmful in my personal life as I can get easily frustrated. As a manager, this would negatively impact me in high stress or frustrating situations as emotions are already running high, and someone who cannot stay level-headed and patiently go through all the options isn't an optimal manager. From these assessments, I would take away that I think I should explore my competitive side a little more and should do everyday things like mindfulness and meditation to reduce my impatience. So when taking my week 3 self-assessments, I was surprised by how hard it was to gauge how innovative I am. I would say that I enjoy finding creative solutions, but some questions I really had no idea how to answer or what I would really do if I was placed in this situation versus what I hoped that I would do. So among my strengths are that I have a strong tendency to take into account behavior in my decision styles. This can be an asset to managers as I have always had an interest in human behavior and interactions. I find that this can make you approachable and improves your ability to understand how to optimize teams, as well as understanding individuals' motivators and stressors given different personality types. So among my weaknesses, I would say they come into play during the innovative attitude scale. I can be very scared to try something new as I find I have a fear of failure, especially in front of a boss or someone that I admire. So from this week, I'll be taking away that I need to refocus on my fear of failure. This has been something that I've always struggled with and has held me back, and I need to take a more proactive approach at understanding why this is such a big fear for me and kind of how I can deal with it.
The week 4 assessment was actually my favorite and was very eye-opening to me. At first, when I reviewed my results, I was really surprised by the outcome, but after reflecting, I quickly realized that the results were actually very accurate, so it helped me to address some issues that I would potentially face in a management role. Among my strengths is my ability to address people in one-on-one situations and to communicate supportively. This strength was reflected in my assessment of my communication styles in the way that I would support another individual through my communication in a one-on-one setting. In addition, I ranked in the second quartile for my knowledge of coaching and counseling and my ability to provide negative feedback and communicate supportively. As mentioned earlier, this is something I've really been working on in my co-chair role, and I realized how sometimes situations are really difficult to provide that negative feedback, especially when the person has become your friend. So having this experience will certainly help me as a manager in the future, and because those negative conversations can be some of the hardest but most impactful. My weakness from this assessment was definitely the way that I responded when faced with a complaint. I scored very low in this section because I was continuously deflecting the response. I find this is something that I do on a daily basis and was not aware that it was really something I needed to improve on. So this assessment really opened my eyes to how I should be better communicating in these situations. I sometimes find that it can be awkward to respond to people who are complaining, and I always try to relate to them in some way, but I've realized that this is not the most effective method since most of the time I actually don't relate to their complaint. So as a manager, it's really important to be able to respond to complaints in the way that moves the situation forward and looks for a solution, because just relating to the person doesn't actually do as much as I thought it did. So from this assessment, I'm really taking away how I respond to these complaints. It's something that will take time for me, as it's not my favorite thing to do. But this assessment really brought up a weakness that I didn't know I had, and so I'll be very conscious about it moving forward.
So when I first met Maddie, I thought that she was a bit intimidating. She seemed kind of reserved and almost uninterested, but at the same time, she seemed really competent, and she didn't seem unkind or anything like that. And now that I know Maddie a bit better, I realize that she's much friendlier and open than I initially thought. In her week 2 assessment, we discussed how she scored highest in analytical thinking, and I think that this comes across in her personality and could be why she seemed cold in the beginning. As far as coming across as uninterested, she has also talked about having trouble being vulnerable. I think that when you first meet her, she's a bit shy and uncertain, and that comes across as indifferent, but as you get to know her, this changes, and you see that she's really kind and friendly. One perception that did not change was my feelings on Maddie's competence. As she mentioned in her personal management scores, she scored in the top quartile. She's a natural leader, which is something I recognized early on and really continue to believe.
So my first impression of Jess was that she was very quiet and reserved, but also very real. After getting to know her better, I learned that she is really great at working with people, and although she is sometimes shy at first, she can really open up and is not shy after getting to know her. In her week 4 assessment, we spoke about how she scored very high in her communication skills, and this is something that really rings true, as she is a great communicator and is a very supportive and hardworking teammate. Like she mentioned, she really believes that results are driven by hard work, and this is something that I've certainly seen. Her self-assessments also demonstrate her interpersonal skills, and this is something I think is accurate as well.